Today, we're engaging a diplomat and governance expert with international or of international repute. He's a man of many hats and of many things. Dr. Nii Ishmael Dodoo. He's a former UN official for the Sahel, and I'm going to be having a conversation with him on what he's been up to and how we can better the fortunes of our country, Ghana. Dr. Dodoo, a very good morning to you.
Good morning. Thank you very much for having me.
I believe, I don't know, I think I may have spoken to you once in the past.
Yes.
But not physically in the studio.
Yes.
So this is the first encounter we're having
Indeed.
in the studio.
Yeah.
But tell me, I just want you to let those who may not know you get to know you better. Who is Dr. Nii Dodoo? I don't want to say what is your background, but yes, what is your background? And what have you been up to? Just put those together.
Right.
Who are you?
Right. Thank you very much. So I grew up in, Ododo constituency, a very famous place that most people know, near the Palladium Cinema, Amamomo, those environs. So I'm a really, really, you would say that I'm a Ga man. I call myself a son of Ododo because I really grew up in those particular areas. And I went to Accra Academy, so I'm a blow guy.
Oh, okay.
Right. And then from Accra Academy, I went to Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology, where I studied natural resources management. And I focused on policy and governance aspects of those. From that, I got, a scholarship, a full scholarship, one scholarship meant for an African to study in Oxford University.
Okay. And
I made it to, and where I studied, I have my graduate degree in Oxford University and also a fellow of Lincoln College from Oxford University. Then from then I've done a lot of work. Most of my career had been with the United Nations. Spent close.
When you say most of your career,
yeah,
how long is that?
Close to 2
I know
decades.
you've done 25 years in some of these areas,
right? But, more than 16 years with the United Nations, and I've served in over. I work with more than 36 countries in Africa. I probably think that it's about 53 countries globally in terms of work experience in the human development aspect. And then I had a privilege to serve at the highest office or the executive office of Secretary General, Ban Ki-moon, and I served him quite well. And then Secretary General Guterres appointed a special advisor for the Sahel, of which I was made the Chief of Staff to help really develop the UN integrated strategy for the Sahel. And I coordinated the implementation of that for more than 5 years. And so overall, my life had been more focusing on how to deal with the issues of poverty, issues of crisis, then issues of really abject poverty that really engulfs societies and communities. And I've had the privilege to work with several heads of states, governments of West Africa particularly. And I've had opportunity to really provide a strategic thinking, for how to deal with some of those issues. I'm quite proud of the work that we did in the Sahel region, particularly at a time when there's a lot of extremist attacks in the various countries in the Sahel, about 10 of them, 10 countries in the Sahel. And we came out with a blueprint to really deal with the issues of the crisis. We created about 10,000 jobs within an enclave that is very difficult for people to.
Where specifically?
We call it the Liptako-Goma region, which is the cross-border region between Mali, Niger, and Burkina. And this is about...
it's sort of a no man's land.
Yes, it's a no man's land. And I work very closely with some of these Tuaregs, where I did a cross-border trade program with them. They were very surprised to see somebody like me travel all the way to close a border in the sub-Saharan, in the Sahara Desert area to talk to these people. Very interesting people. In fact, the work with the UN gave an opportunity to see the anthropological side of human development, because very often when you talk about development, we focus on the economics, but there's not much of the social aspect. I'm an environmental expert, so the environmental side of things is also very useful. But then the anthropology, trying to understand people, is very helpful in developing solutions to address their issues. Mm. Yeah. So I said to myself that if I'm able to crack a blueprint strategy for African solutions for African poverty, then I believe that my work in life will be done.
So it appears to be an interesting stint that you've had with the United Nations, and outside of that, yes, your own work that you've been doing. Yeah. It also reminds me, when you spoke about poverty, a program I took online from MIT way back, The Challenges of Global Poverty. Right. And this is a long time ago, exposed me to quite a bit when it comes to the poverty terrain, especially on the continent of, yes, of Africa. But having spoken about these, now that you're outside of the UN system, you consult for the UN, but you're outside of the UN system. Yep. What have you been up to on a personal level? I know you are very interested in youth development, yes, especially in the Ga-Dangme areas as well. Just tell us a little bit about that before we segue, because look, I used to work in the Pram area, and I know that when it comes to education and certain amenities in some of those areas, yes, MPs, DCs, and others will try their best, but there are major problems. What do you see?
Yeah, thank you very much. This is a very good question, which really touches me a lot. Growing up, let me start from this. Growing up in the Dodoo constituency, particularly in the areas that I spoke to you about, I went to a public school which is close to Bukom. Today, when you look at the Ga-Dangme community from, let me say, Choko area all the way to Pram, Ningo, and so on the coastal stretch, it's a place, the Ga-Dangme community are probably those communities that arguably have one of the highest rates of poverty. Most of their schools that they have, most of the schools are in a very dilapidated conditions. The youthful population there, we're talking about 2.5 to 2.6 million people, a very significant number. And 80% of them are between the ages of 13 to, let's say, 25 years. And most of them are not going to school. It's a very, very challenging situation they are faced with. The health centers are all not in good shape. See the La Polyclinic, for example, which has been broken down. They not, developed it anymore. We have the Salaga market. So there are a lot of challenges that the Ga-Dangme community are facing. Now, what I took to myself to do is to give back to my community. I work with quite a few Ga-Dangme people in the diaspora to set up what is called the Ga-Dangme Alliance for Change. It's a social movement to raise the consciousness of the challenges that the Ga-Dangme people are facing. And the challenge they are facing is really urban poverty. It's not a rural poverty situation. I mean, with urban poverty, you see so many riches around you, so many opportunities, but you can't access them. Right. One, because you don't have the technical capacity to do so. You don't have the skills, and you are just pushed to just the occupation that you know of, which most of them are is the fisheries. Even the fisheries sector is not booming. So they have nothing to do, and the education they don't have good access to quality education, access to healthcare. All these things are very, very challenging. So the Alliance for Change is to raise the consciousness of these challenges and to actually leverage politics today to say, look, we're going to do a block vote to any political party that would guarantee our interests. And these are the interests: to fix our schools, fix our community clinics, make sure that the women can have access to those health centers, fix a lab polyclinic, fix our market for the women, but create what we call the Ga-Dangme Development Agency or Authority, which we then do a development planning for the Ga state. And they will leverage this plan in terms of resources through property taxes that they are supposed to have, through some of the royalties that they're supposed to have, and also a proper valuation of the land asset that the Ga-Dangme people have, and get people to pay back what they have to pay.
So interesting bits there. I just want to find out from you though. Do you feel, I mean, in your experience, growing up and where you find yourself now, do you feel the Ga-Dangme community has been deprived in a way, that Ga-Dangmes have been treated unfairly, put on the fringes of development over time?
I feel very strongly about that. My late father was a footballer. He's actually a founding member of the Black Stars. His name is Ishmael Nii Dodoo. And he used to tell me stories about independence, what some of the decisions that stalwarts for the Ghana community made to enable the Republic of Ghana to be formed, in terms of deciding to welcome Kwame Nkrumah, giving an opportunity to be the MP of Odudu constituency, in spite of the fact that it's not from there, and give the land asset for universities, formation of public offices, all these administrations that we have, and the decision they made for that is just for the purposes of forming the Republic of Ghana, which they are very proud of. But they thought that by doing so, Ga-Dangme people will be given opportunity to actually benefit from the essence of having a capital in Ghana, in Accra. But today, look at some of the very valuable land assets that government has taken, and they were supposed to be used for certain intended purposes, which they don't use it anymore for that. So one would expect that the land will be reverted back to the allodial owners of the land for them to decide what to do with it. And then
we have had such calls.
Yeah, there's a lot of challenge. So we feel shortchanged in this republic. We believe that
Ga-Dangme
feel shortchanged in this republic. If you look at the wealth of Greater Accra, the World Bank indicator by 2030, the Greater Accra wealth in terms of GDP will be about $35 billion. Now, how much of that, of goods and services, is benefiting the Ga-Dangme community? When you look at the richest men in Greater Accra, how many of them are Ga? Look at the wealthy areas, the cantonments, Labone, and so on. How many Ga-Dangme people are there? And then you have all these youthful individuals, close to 2 million of them. All they see is poverty all around them, and they feel like their settlement is just pushed to the coastal areas, and this is their land, and then they are seeing all these challenges around. So I think we have to change the narrative. Ghana cannot achieve or make an acceleration towards sustainable development goals with this type of inequality.
Right.
So there must be some deliberate attempt to do that, which is why the Ga-Dangme Alliance for Change is very important, because what we are saying is that in order to lift people out of poverty, you have to have a deliberate policy and strategy and action for it. And that would mean that you need to have a purposeful focus on them. So that would translate into having some kind of Ga-Dangme Development Authority that would look at all the challenges that they are faced with and really plow back the money through some kind of trust fund. And with this, and to be honest, if this happens for the Ga-Dangme community, it will provide a blueprint for how Ghana can develop.
I see.
Interesting
points you make again, but let me just ask you, you spend quite a bit of time outside of the country.
Yep.
You spend some time in the country. When you look at Ghana today, and I want you to be a bit brief on that, what picture do you see? You've spoken about the youth. I'll get to the SDGs and other matters later, but unemployment issues, governance issues. the economy, health, what picture do you see? The positives and the negatives. What do you see when you come back to Ghana? What picture, what impression do you get? And where are the areas you feel we could do a lot more to make this country better, safer, more economically viable, especially for young people?
Right. When you look at Ghana today, you know, a perception from outside, and I'm talking about the perception that a lot of our partners, I would say, in development look at. They see a glorious country which is sliding down a bit. Because the expectations of Ghana today is that Ghana should have been a country that will probably be equal to the kind of development you like to see, that we are seeing in Hong Kong, in South Korea, in Singapore. So Ghana is not measured against its counterparts in African countries. It's always measured against these international realms, simply because of the way Ghana has socialized itself internationally. When you talk about Ghana, you talk about a country that is very strong in democracy, very strong in governance, where, you know, people feel that the rule of law actually should prevail here. And so it was very shocking when Transparency International and others revealed that our judges and court system is actually corrupt, and is one of the corrupt sectors. So you see all these holes that are punched into a glorious Ghana that we need to fix. So we need to fix our international image. We also need to fix the aspect of our international image that deals with how we are managing our economy and how the economic sectors are actually growing. If you look at industrialization, for example, Ghana is not doing well at all. So we sort of dropped from all the factories that Kwame Nkrumah built, which was helping us to engage in the global economy. We dropped from all of that to
a tomato factory.
Yeah. Now we're importing
the glass factory, the jute factory,
the shoe factory, and all that.
Shoe factory, and even meat processing.
Meat processing, yeah. So all these factories then would help you to engage the global economy in a very positive way, and because without international trade, countries, you cannot grow your economy. And now
we see the effects of that, because if you look at inflationary trends and then the very things we're importing into our country, it tells you that if we had got things right then, wouldn't be where we are currently.
Yeah. So a lot of people, when they discover the current state of affairs in the country, are very shocked. And the question I get most of them always calling me to ask is, what is happening? What is happening to your country? And then it's a very difficult situation. And for those of us who live abroad, we constantly have to answer some of these questions. I think that what Ghana needs to fix is really focusing on the agricultural sector. And when I say agricultural sector, I'm talking about value chain agriculture, and making sure that you bring in from the production all the way to marketing and trade, that we set up sectors, that industrialized sectors that we can take advantage of. And we have to link that to what I think we need to do now, is what I call the human capital strategy. Ben, where the world is going today will require that every country that wants to engage, where the trajectory of growth of the world, need to do so by having a very strong human capital strategy. What do I mean by that? You need to be able to have a population that have the requisite skills, talents, that will be able to attract foreign direct investment into your country, and will be able to engage the world. We're talking about mobile and technology, digital economy at the moment. We need to make sure that our educational system is able to deliver the talents and the skills of humans, of our population, such that if anybody wants to make a foreign direct investment decision in any country in the world, to West Africa, then they will think about Ghana. Ghana can position itself to become the Wall Street of the world, of West Africa. Ghana can position itself to leverage the $1.3 trillion economy, trade economy that the West Africa is going to have. Ghana can position itself to be the hub where maybe mobile phones are manufactured. Because if you look at mobile technology growth in West Africa, is probably the fastest across Africa. So Ghana can position itself to be the hub that would push these things through.
I mean, we have the Africa Free Trade Area, and there are many benefits we can get there.
Exactly.
But with all of these things that you've mentioned, I mean, you mentioned agriculture. I am thinking mechanized agriculture, and of course, creating that value chain. But my question then to you, because you started talking about Ghana's image on the international front, have we slidden? Has there been a retrogression in terms of Ghana's image on the back of some of these things you speak of?
You talk to businesses and they tell you, I consult for some of, some private sector and some governments, and try to facilitate investment into those countries. You talk to businesses and they say, look, it's so difficult to do anything in the country that when you're a businessman and you have a challenge with your clients and you go to the court, you can't guarantee that you're actually going to get a fair deal in court. So a country where we have issues of rule of law, the issues of corruption is always on the back, it's always staring at you. And then you have our banks having challenges, even to issue standby letter of credit, it takes time and all this. I think that
all of those impede the business.
I think that Ghana has really slid. And if you look at our inflation rates, and then
inflation has fallen a bit. I mean, from 25 point something,
but it's still very, very, very high now. How much? Look at it. No businessman can actually go to, well, maybe I'm exaggerating, but you go to a bank and you want to take a loan to invest in your business, you are not very sure. Now you have a debt ratio to GDP is 93.5%. So which means that if Ghana is a company and he earns 10,000 Ghana cedis, you spend 9,350 to pay debt, and then you are left with 650 Ghana cedis to fix your...
Not to pay debt, to pay the interest.
The interest on the debt.
Not the debt.
Not the debt, but the interest on the debt. And then you are left with 650 Ghana. So you earn 10,000 Ghana cedis, you only left with 650 to fix your education, to pay your rent, to take your children to school. This is impossible. So the image of the country is really, really is a bad shape. Now, our role in international communities, for example, look at the numbers of Ghanaians in the UN system today. It keeps dropping all the time. I'm talking about, seniority position.
I mean, there were good days with Busumuru Kofi Annan. I mean, currently you would see the likes of Ben Duchimalo,
right,
among others in there, but the numbers are the paucity of...
They've gone down a lot. We used to have a lot of Ghanaians in the Assistant Secretary General level or Under Secretary General level or Director level. And then, so
what do you think is accounting for that?
I think the first thing is, as a country, we have not decided that we want to have a deliberate policy for, one, strengthening the image of our country internationally, two, really dealing with the issues of corruption, and three, strengthening our rule of law, and four, a deliberate policy to really leverage the sheer wealth of that is within West Africa as one of the stalwarts of Pan-Africanism. And if we've done these four factors, I think that Ghana will be doing very well. If you take, for example, just positioning to grow our strength within the international diplomacy, then as a country, we'll make sure that we put forward very strong candidates, and there are a lot of them, into maybe, a vice president for Africa at the World Bank, for example, or African Development Bank president will put candidates forward for Under-Secretary General in the United Nations, candidate forward for World Trade Organization, things like that. These are very, very important if you compare.
I mean, it's not a total loss. Recently, for example, we do know that our Minister for Foreign Affairs and Regional Integration, Shelley Ayoko Botche,
yes,
has made some inroads in terms of the Commonwealth,
yes,
and a position that she was eyeing on the African continent, a few here and there. But I do agree with you that the numbers are not what they used to be.
No.
And I also believe, I do not know what you think, I also believe that it's a lack of wanting to learn other languages as well, to also increase our abilities. For example, our Francophone brothers and sisters, a lot of them would pass through countries like Ghana, get the linguistic background.
Right.
So if they put you on the same level and you have similar qualifications, they have a language over you or two. And I believe that's also something that
the language factor is very important. I mean, I had to learn French when I went to the Sahel region, but it was a baptism of fire. I have to, because everything else is French. So I'm thankfully, as an adult, I learned the French, and being able to do so just gave me the impression that the confirmation in my spirit that, look, anybody else can learn a second language. And I think we should make sure that's part of our human capital strategy too. Make sure that we learn the French, because we are surrounded by French. The president looks good whenever he's in a francophone country and he speaks French. And since I speak French and I write, and whenever I meet francophones, they feel very comfortable to engage in business. So that's very true. But there are a lot of Ghanaians who are speaking French and Chinese. One thing that Dr. Kwame Nkrumah did for us, which was very, very useful, is to have a relationship with Togo, the university in Togo, and Sheikh Anta Diop in Senegal, so that our students who want to learn French could go there to do so free. So the second year the second year in the University of Legon and Tech, they choose between these two countries to go there and polish their French and come back. And most of them are actually doing well. The challenge is that most of them are overseas. I know quite a number of them, and overseas, some of them are also taking other nationalities, so they are not Ghanaians in essence. But we need to do that.
So on international diplomacy, since you've mentioned it, in terms of our foreign policy, what would you propose? You've been out there, you've seen what other countries are doing, the conscious efforts the Chinas and other countries are doing in terms of foreign policy that will inure to the benefit of their countries. Where has Ghana got it right? What more can we do? Just brief thoughts on that.
I think that Ghana, since independence, Ghana has been doing very well in terms of our foreign policy. We are, and by the way, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Relations is really one of the strongest ministries. They are very active in international engagement. I saw them when we set up the SDG advisor role for SDG advocate role with Ban Ki-moon. When we're setting that role up, our thinking was that we needed a country in Africa that would mobilize the southern part. So we divided the continent in north and south, right? So we needed one African country that can do that. And Ghana was chosen, and President Mahama then was selected to be the SDG advocate. And when President Mahama lost the election to President Nana Akufo-Addo, we decided to still maintain that position for Ghana, because we're clearly doing a good job. And President Nana Akufo-Addo is a very one of the things that is credited for is astuteness in international relations. He's one of the fine international diplomats you can imagine. He carried himself very well, you know, in the international stage. So we have done well in terms of maintaining our public image, the role we play in the African Union, in ECOWAS, and so on and so forth. But what we have not done well is actually to leverage this for the benefit of the country. You know, Senegal, at a point, they had the Vice President for Africa for the World Bank being Senegalese. Today, they have the President, number 2 or so, in international IFC, Financial Corporation, being Senegalese. And then they have quite a number of them in the UN system, in the World Bank, and so on and so forth.
Of course, that allows you to also, when you have a proliferation of some of your citizens there, of course, in enacting policy and even some of these World Bank and other arrangements, they speak for you, not just the continent, but their country, of course. Will not be there and look at, you know, policies or frameworks that affect them.
If you look at what they have done with infrastructure, the grant aspect of the money that's paid for the infrastructure is quite huge. And it's all because you have these people there who will be able to structure the loans and the grants in such a way that it benefits you. So we need to really do that. And, you know, you have countries like Rwanda, the president engages in these sort of things in terms of even positions that are awarded in the United Nations system, that the president actively will call and say, look, this is my candidate for my country, and look at how they are doing. So I think we need to think about that, really leverage these institutions so well for our economic benefit. The other thing we need to do is really to think about constructing a country that will become the finest of international trade and international economy in West Africa. You know, just because of our geopolitical positioning, Ghana is so positioned to be able to do this. We speak very good English. We have good infrastructure in terms of education, you know, high-level education. We can, to the extent that we'll be able to construct a nation where our human capital strategy is so cogent that anybody that wants to invest in West Africa would think about citing the headquarters in Ghana. That's what we need to do. And we need to really deliberately invest in that. And today, anybody that wants to lead this country should think about this particular issue of human capital strategy. Because the world is growing in such a way that by 2050, any investor in any world would have to look for 8 out of 10 people of African origin or Africans to be able to field its investment in terms of human resources. And then we are talking about fourth industrial revolution, which is more driven by digital technology. And Ghanaians are very smart people, naturally smart people. So if you leverage this and invest very well, I believe that this country will become, you know, one that you cannot even imagine.
From 2050 onwards, the projections are that the population of youth will be way over 50% on the African continent. Already we are seeing such signals. So I can see where you're pointing at. But before we talk about leadership, elections, as they are about to come through, and a few other matters, I'd like to talk about this issue of the Global Fund. I'm sure you've followed.
Yes.
And how, I mean, medicines and other crucial medical and supplies have been stuck at our ports. Now, it's a no-brainer for me because this is the first time in its 22 years or so of existence that we're seeing anything of this sort globally.
Yep.
You followed the story. Tens of millions of products given to Ghana, still sitting at the port, not cleared. Some of them by early next year, first quarter, will go back. We have to then spend to destroy them. You know how it works. And they feed into SDG 3, which talks about health and well-being. when such things happen, since we're talking about Ghana's international image and we're also talking about health, among other crucial issues, what do you make of it? How does it impact Ghana? Because now the Global Fund is saying, we can't give you any more until you have made good use of what we've already given you. Quick thoughts on that.
Really, it's a very bad signal for the country. And also to think that Global Fund was set up to deal with very sensitive health issues, which affects the development of developing countries. So you have, and these are grants. They are not, you don't pay. You don't pay for these things. Exactly. So we're talking about tuberculosis, issues of tuberculosis, malaria, and HIV, AIDS, and so on. And to think that your citizens actually suffering from this, and there are drugs there for them, and they're stuck in a port and you don't clear them. I just cannot wrap my mind around why we are not doing this. We're not clearing them. I mean, and I'm hearing things of taxes that we need to pay to the port and so on and so forth.
The Global Fund will give you about, is it 1 to 2% of the actual figure, so you can clear, which in our case was around $2 million. And we then started telling them that we had increased our port charges. I mean, the GRA at a point waived taxes, other requirements were in there. Now I hear there are port charges, but summing up to about 7 million Ghana cedis. And we're basically saying as a country that we don't have 7 million Ghana cedis to pay for some of these things to be released. It's mind-boggling.
I mean, you can't have any excuse for this, and what it does to our international image is that we're a country where we just don't care about our citizens, and that's the signal you're sending. Then it begs the question: what is leadership for? It also begs the question of how are you dealing with your people who are suffering from HIV/AIDS, and mind you, Global Fund was set up to deal with these issues because the argument was that Africans or developing countries, with all the challenges they are faced with, they will not be able to raise the adequate financing for some of these drugs, and therefore the Global Fund was set up to go to deliver these things, And here we are not just, I mean, the issue is just clearing them, and they're going to go bad in the next 3 months or so. Not to talk about the debts that
by first quarter next year, some of them.
Well, not to talk about the debts that have occurred, as a result of some of these drugs not.
And you know what's interesting? So part of the debt that has accrued, I mean, we could have, if we had done this early, but at the port, the longer an item stays, you incur demurrage.
Yes.
And once demurrage also accumulates, then you may have a huge figure to deal with. That is where we find ourselves currently. And I don't know, but the prayer is that we'll be able to, because imagine going to hospital at some point and some basic necessities. One of the most common illnesses you would find here is malaria.
Yep.
And a hospital doesn't have, what you need to treat malaria.
Yep.
That would be quite a situation. And all of that hinges on leadership, which then brings me to my next question. Ghana is at a crossroads when it comes to leadership. Fourth Republic, there have been exchanges of power between the two main political parties, MPP and NDC. It's another electoral year. The MPP is seeking to break the 8. The former president, Mahama, is seeking, for the first time, it's interesting because one party is seeking to do something that has never happened before, break an 8-year cycle. The other is seeking to bring back a former president, not happened in the Fourth Republic before. What do you see when you weigh these two political parties and the things their flag bearers have been saying? What do you see?
First of all, what is very interesting that many people don't talk about is to have two Northerners
Oh yeah, that too. We
you know,
talk about it, but I just
to have two Northerners actually vying for the high office of presidency.
Yeah.
And I think it speaks something to Ghana, to be honest. If you look at since independence, the way the North had been crafted, you know, we see that part of the country as having serious challenges. And here we are today. We have two fine individuals, very, very intelligent individuals, who are vying for the office of the president, and they are coming from the northern region. So it's a very, very interesting spectacle to have. But then we have seen since the Fourth Republic, what I see is to reiterate your point that we are at a crossroad, and I see the crossroad in the sense of anybody who has been associated with the Fourth Republic in the 1992 to now is either very old in terms of politicians, right? Very old. Some of them are dead. They are invalid. So we are at the point where after this election, we are necessarily, Ghana is going to see by 2028, we're going to see new faces come into the politics. We're going to see a transition, you know. And this is where I think that is extremely important to have the leadership right at this very particular juncture, because we are not just going to see a shift in our politics, we're going to see a shift in the realms in terms of what Ghana stands for. An accelerated digital economy, we need to, how are we positioning to engage that very youthful population? In fact, in Ghana's situation, 60 to 70% of our 3.35 million people will become youth, will be in the ages of 18 to 25. So I think we are probably looking at a very huge population. A very youthful, yeah. And then the poverty is actually accelerating, inequalities is accelerating. And then we have now challenges with our rule of law in terms of, you know, everything that surrounds it. We have deep challenges, huge challenges with corruption, very huge economic challenges as well. So this election should be one that everybody needs to really look at it very well and look and examine the two personalities, not the parties. Look at their personalities and ask yourself which of them will be able to position the country into that future of that I've painted. And I think this is where Ghana is today. And when I look at the policies that most of them are bringing, you know, NDC and MPP seem to approach national development in a similar fashion, right? It's because you know, our major challenge is to deal with the issue of poverty and so on. I have seen much more with President John Mahama in terms of really pushing this 24-hour economy, which other people, which the MPP say, well, you know, it's happening already. But I think the ethos of the 24-hour economy is very, very interesting. Interesting in the sense that when you look at where Ghana is today, we need to accelerate our economy, right? So you need to look at how we can make very good use of the currency of our time, right? Time is currency is time, right? And so raising a consciousness of Ghanaians to say, look, you have to work hard, work 24 hours. I mean, just that political thinking is very, very important. That philosophy to change our attitude to say, let's work hard. It also highlights the point about efficiency. You know, that, look, you have to make good use of your time. And I think this thing about starting a meeting 2 hours later and so on, this 24-hour economy speaks to that issues of attitude as well. But then it also provides an opportunity to really grow our industrial sector. Just the thought of running a 24-hour economy speaks to the issues of value chain.
But you do know that a 24-hour economy is not just a matter of, it's easier said than done, and it's not just about, oh, we're working 24 hours, or we are working 16 hours, or 14 hours, or whatever the case may be. Other countries, in fact, you have some cities that operate 24-hour economies. And even then, it's not everything. It's not wholesale. There are certain aspects that would. Do you think Ghana is ready?
No, I think that I think Ghana should be ready. And I believe we have no option. We're living in a very fast-paced global economy, all right? And mobile technology and digitization has provided an opportunity to really bring people together. This is where we are seeing the peak of globalization. So, I mean, why can't Ghana become the hub to really service international companies, for example? Our people are very smart, very intelligent, and that speaks again to our human capital strategy. We could be serving South America, companies in South America. We could be serving Chinese and so on, you know. And this 24-hour economy provides that kind of attitude to be able to do that. I don't see it as really an economic policy. I see it more as a socio-economic policy, a policy that really deals with our attitude, deals with our efficiency, deals with our skills that we need to have in order to be able to do this, and deals with everything associated with maximizing industrialization setup, from security perspective, from the skills or the human capital that you need to deploy, and maximize, being efficient with your production factors of production. So I think we are very ready for these things, which means that it has to appear. The policy implementation must even find itself in schools, from basic education all the way to universities. But one key point you raised, which is very important, is that this 24-hour economy that we talked about is not every sector that is applied. Right? They have to look at the sectors where you can apply it. And the sectors that you need to apply this are really the economic sectors. In agribusiness, for example, you need to really look at that. When you look at trade, the other day I saw that the trade volume in Cote d'Ivoire alone is $11.2 billion of things that they import and so on. And I look at Ghana and I say, look, why can't we become the industrialized hub for major agricultural products? Why can't we do that? So that we'll be the major distribution centers across West Africa, and we are talking 1.3 trillion economy. I mean, if for example
instead of doing that, we are rather getting the basics from other countries, even tomatoes, onions, and the rest.
Onions and tomatoes and pepper and so on. And when you look at our staples, the money involved in our staples, in terms of wealth and value, if you take pepper, for example, I make this analogy that 35 million population, if you look at households of three, a father, mother, and a son or a daughter, then we are talking about 10 million households, right? And in which a family of three, 10 million households. And if you are growing pepper, every day people eat, and pepper is in the soup that we eat. If you're a pepper seller to 10.5 million households, where you're making maybe 3 Ghana cedis, a month, we're talking about $30 million as a pepper seller. Pepper alone.
And now the price of pepper has shot through the roof, actually.
So if you grow pepper, $30 million per month in terms of profits. Ghana cedis, right? 30 million Ghana cedis, which is about $3 million, let's say $3 million a month. Then you multiply it by 12, you're talking 36 million a year. Pepper. What about onions? What about other things? So
you're talking about large scale, and that is one of the other parts of the world I've been in. Some of the richest people there are the farmers.
Yep.
They are the ones who are able to sponsor their children to go into Ivy League universities and all of that without breaking a sweat. Yep. Here, we don't have that sort of mechanized, large-scale farming. Very few are in there. Yep. Whether it is government-backed or private sector-backed, that is one of our problematic areas. I mean, you imagine that we're having one of the most dismal cocoa seasons we've ever had.
Yeah.
And we're still using a cutlass to break the shell,
Yeah.
the pod, get in there. And when someone is using mechanization to do 50 times what you can do within an hour, there's no way we can compete.
Yeah. The interesting thing is that we have Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology. And when you go to Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology and walk through the thesis of engineering students, it will amaze you. It will amaze you. So we have thousands and thousands of new patents sitting there as theses, never actualized. So the question one asks is, and I'm glad we're talking about leadership, the question one asks is, what is the philosophy of our country, a leadership philosophy around our education? Education for what? Should we just...
What is the end game?
What is the end game?
Or is it education for the sake of education?
For the sake of education. You know, and and in this particular season in which we are in the world, education is one of the important sectors that everyone deals with, because that's what is going to grow your economy. As I said,
since you've gone there, let me just do this as we wind down. Now we have a conversation on free SHS, and whether quantity or quality, but then the bit about let's make it a law. So the future governments are bound by it. And some people have looked at it from different angles, saying, is it the current way it is? There are problems. Should we apply that, or should we just go for it and then fine-tune it along the way? What do you make of that?
No, I think we have to look at our free SHS policy and strengthen the areas where we have challenges. Look, by the way, I feel that we are not managing our economy very well and to leverage the wealth that we need to have. So the economy that is not giving the dividends that we are expecting in order to be able to plow back into free SHS. When you know, you service a debt of 93.5% of your 77 billion GDP per year, you are left with very little to be able to invest in everything that you need to invest in terms of dealing with our health sector, education, and so on. So we have to be very realistic. We cannot make it free and free forever for all, because we can't fund it. The numbers don't...
But free SHS, to be specific, yes, there are problems. WAEC is owed. We can't feed students and all of that. But if you look at how much we've been spending on free SHS, it's not outrageous. These are not crazy sums compared to what we spend on other things.
No, yeah. They are not crazy. And I'm not talking about the issues of a WAEC and so on. I'm only talking about our ability to fund the free, right? So if you have a free policy, you must be able to put the budget there. And the budget every year doesn't show that we are able to do it. So we have to be very realistic. So we have to go back to say, okay, how much of the free can we give? And be very clear in our policies to say it's free HSS, but free in these particular areas. But certain areas, people need to come in. School feeding. I mean, we had WFP, World Food Program, engaging in school feeding. Maybe we should let them increase their budget in the school feeding process. Now, the school feeding itself, we have to look at the content or the nutrition that we give our children. That's also something that we need to deal with. But then, I believe that free SHS is a very, very important policy for us. A very key policy within the context of our human capital strategy. As I said, Ghana should be the country that becomes the hub of everything fine within West Africa. And we have to look at the sectors that are growing within West Africa. Mobile sector is growing very fast, so we should be the country where mobile phones are manufactured or whatever they do, strategic natural resources. We have to learn from how we use our lithium and the new emerging natural resources that are coming. Today in West Africa, we don't have refineries. Oil and gas is going to grow in several West African countries. Liberia will start thinking about oil and gas because they have it in large deposit, Guinea and so on. Why can't we strengthen our oil refinery and we can make it proper refinery? We need to be refining our oil and gas and adding value to it. We can set up a processing unit that would deal with strategic natural resources that are used for manufacturing of chips and so on, all these mobile phones, and that we can do that. So we have to think first how much we want to grow, the wealth we want to leverage within West Africa, and then we link that into our education system. Now, once we are able to make that analysis, then investing in free SHS or investing in certain type of skills in education becomes an investment, an economic investment, because the returns will be very high.
So in other words, it's not a bad thing, and no one says it is, but there's a lot more work to be done.
A lot more work to be done, and we need to think through it very well. But also, in a situation where you have such widening inequality, the top, 7% that are making all the money, they should not have their children go to school free. They should be able to pay. So we have to apply needs assessment as well, which means that within the free SHS, there may be people that necessarily have to have everything free because they just can't afford. If you look at a Ga-Dangme community, as I talked about,
it must be stratified. But those who can afford it should be part of it.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So
we've run out of time, but I just want to sneak this by you. Our constitution, as it is, some say it needs a lot of work. Is it fit for purpose? In about a minute, and then we can go.
I think we need to reform our constitution. Only to change one thing. We need to review our constitution. Only to change, if we were to change only one thing,
what would that be?
The executive has too much powers in terms of too much powers. We have to limit the powers of the executive. We have to also deal with this issue of cabinet representation with members of parliament and cabinet representation. A president must be able to choose people that are very smart, skillful, be able to select them from anywhere. You don't have to force his hand to say, well, select them from members of parliament. With all due respect, honorable members are honorable members. But then what that provision leads you to, that if you have members of parliament, and we've had some before, who cannot read or write or something like that, then you are forced to make them ministers of state. I'm exaggerating, but this is where we are, and I think we need to be.
You may not necessarily be exaggerating. We've seen some things,
so we have to be very careful about that. Yeah,
right. But it's been great having this conversation with you, Dr. Ishmael Nii Dodoo, and we wish you the very best as you go about all the other things you're doing, and also with the Ga-Dangme Alliance for Change. Thank you for having breakfast with us.
Thank you very much indeed.
This has been another installment of AM Exclusive, and I was hosting Dr. Ishmael Nii Dodoo, a former UN official for the Sahel, and he's been here sharing his thoughts on Ghana and everything in between.